Hi, everybody. My name is Amir Dastori. As was mentioned, I'm the branch manager for the Identity Services branch at DHS. Really appreciate you guys having me here today. I'm going to talk to you about our identity governance solution at DHS, how we went about implementing it, and how it fits right into CDM and CDM's goals, which has really helped us drive some of our identity governance initiatives at DHS. So with that, at a very high level, CDM Phase 2 is aiming to secure unprivileged authentication to the network, secure privileged authentication to the network, and build and report on the master user record. It's obviously a lot more complex than this. There's a lot more to it. But at the highest level, again, we're looking at the unprivileged accounts, the privileged accounts, making sure they're secure, and we have continuous monitoring of them. This is really where our identity governance solution fits right in. And our service catalog that we have at DHS also fits into this. So our service catalog of enterprise services at DHS includes 5 major services. On the top left, we have our Trusted Identity Exchange. This is our attribute exchange service. So as we're trying to build this master user record, as we're trying to gather all the data, this is a solution that we use to connect to all of our authoritative sources and pull these attributes. We share them for our governance solution, and we also share them to other systems across the department that have a need for that identity data. Our Access Lifecycle Management solution is our identity governance solution. This is what we use for onboarding, for offboarding, and for managing access to some of our financial applications. Mobile authentication is, again, the issuance of the derived credential and the use of that to access our systems. On the bottom left, the single sign-on solution is our authentication service. On the bottom right, our authorization, which is more of a planned service right now, is trying to get us to a more fine-grained model. The top 2, Trusted Identity Exchange and Access Lifecycle Management, are going to be really what I talk about throughout this conversation, because this is what relates to our both identity governance as well as our CDM effort. So when the CDM program came about, we started to think through how can we do this with the infrastructure that we already have, and as really a distributed agency with multiple large operating components, what is the best architecture that fits? So we kind of started off here. It's a little bit hard to see, but the bottom line of it is on the very top, we have a goal of reporting our data to the CDM dashboard. From there, you have our enterprise services, which in there we already had multiple authoritative sources of data, things like personnel security, HR, PIV cards, training. And again, as I mentioned, we have our TIES solution that takes all this data in. That feeds our ALM solution, which is the master user record. And then came all of the components that we have. So how do the components fit in? Well, some of the data that we needed to report for the components, we already had in our enterprise authoritative systems on the top left. Then the rest of them, we said, OK, how do we integrate with the components, some of which have ICAM solutions, some of which don't? So there's various levels of maturity. So from there, again, as you see that yellow box with the Trusted Identity Exchange, this is where we said, hey, we already have a lot of authoritative identity data. How do we enable components to have local solutions to be successful, yet share the same identity model? So I'll actually show some of the identity model in a few slides, but we said, OK, let's share data from those authoritative systems to various component ICAM solutions, whether it's the same software solution that we have, or whether it's a different software solution. And that way we have, again, a common identity model at the enterprise that's shared with the components, and those components that have a solution are able to make their local access decisions. The ones that don't can leverage our enterprise ALM solution to manage their endpoints and their applications. But either way, whether we're sharing data down to the component or managing the data, managing the access, you kind of see all of it has a feedback loop back up to the enterprise ALM solution, which is our identity governance solution, which is the master user record for the department. So even though we're kind of a distributed environment with major operating components, again, many with very mature and successful ICAM initiatives, all of the data flows down from the enterprise to the component and back up to the enterprise for reporting. So we're able to kind of have this feedback loop of identity data going across the department. So with that, we have our data, and now it's time to actually do the governance work. So we're able to identify the people. We're able to identify the attributes. Now, how do we start managing identities? So this is where we started. We built a conceptual identity governance, or what we call access lifecycle management process. At DHS, as I'm sure with many other agencies, you can't touch our data or our systems unless you have a valid background investigation, right? Your suitability and fitness process. So we start off with that and say, OK, we're going to start with suitability and fitness and say, how can we have a data-driven process? So I'll kind of walk you through this from a perspective of contractor Janet. So the contractor Janet comes into DHS. Her company's been awarded a task order, and she goes through our EOD, our entrance on duty process. As soon as she receives her fitness determination, so that's column 1, we're going to automatically trigger an onboarding process where Janet's core is notified that Janet's able to start, and can you please give us her start date and approve her access. With that is pretty much your birthright provisioning, or giving her access to what she needs on day 1, so when she arrives, she can be successful and productive. Funneling into column 3, Janet's now on the job, she's doing her job responsibilities day to day, and a need has come to access more systems. Janet has a self-service access request capability in ALM where she can go and identify those applications, request that access, and have an approval model where her supervisor, which is the core, and the security officer or system owner can approve it and provision that access for Janet. So now Janet's going on, kind of completing her job responsibilities. Now she has access to what she needs to fulfill her job, but she might be transitioning contract to contract. She might be here for a while. So kick in column 4, which is our access governance, where we have constant eyes and continuous monitoring of her access to include things like certification. Does her job responsibilities and her access line up today? Things like separation of duties. Does she have access to financial applications? Any toxic combinations of access? And really reporting to know who has access, what Janet has access to, and make sure we stay out of audit trouble. And finally, on the offboarding column, as Janet rolls off of the contract or her contract expires, we make sure that we remove all of Janet's access to the network, her PIV card, any systems that she has access to, and her personnel security record. So this is the conceptual model that we planned out, and we said, okay, how do we make this real, and how do we actually implement this at DHS? So with that, we started a set of charters and a set of working groups composed of all the lines of business. So I think one of the key messages that I want to put here, later I'll talk about change management, which is important. But the other part is this identity governance project. It's not a shiny IT tool. It's not a shiny IT project, but it's really a business initiative that enables all of these lines of business. That's why when we started off trying to figure out what to do and how to do it, as you kind of saw through my last slide, I talked about suitability and fitness. Well, that's a CSO-driven process, right? Issuance of PIV cards, for us, it's a CSO-driven process. Then you have that contractor. You have to know who their core is, who their CO is. Are they on a valid task order? Has that task order expired? Those are chief procurement officers. Those are CPO processes, right? So I need to identify and understand contracts. Then you have federal employees. Well, we need to know when the federal employee's been hired, their tentative job offers, their final job offers, their start dates, their separation dates, their transfers. Those are all CHICO, or Chief Human Capital Office, right? And a CIO obviously has all of the provisioning and the systems aspect. And CFO has the financial applications. So we went out and talked to all the lines of business, and we did some extensive interviews with each one of them to really document the process. So in your silo, how does it operate? How do you do your personnel security? How do you issue a PIV card? How do you hire a federal employee? How do you modify and extend a contract so I know the end date of it? So as we documented all these processes, we brought all of them together in a working group, and that really served as our requirements body to say, okay, this is what we've heard everybody doing. We need to tie them all together so we have a cohesive process. And they kind of weighed in, understood things outside of their swim lane that other people do, understood the connections, and we were able to build what I talked about on the previous slide through really collaboration of all those offices. Now, how do we instill that, as some of this is going to require business process change, right? We're going to go to these offices and say, hey, you're doing an excellent job what you're doing, but in order to kind of take the next step and tie your processes together, I need you to do it a little bit different. Or you have all this great data, can you share it with me because I need to make data-driven decisions. So that's where that bottom part comes in, is we established an executive steering committee. We call it our executive coordination group of the CXOs of all of those offices, co-chaired by our chief security officer and our chief information officer. So really having that top-level executive buy-in helped us drive our integrated project team, helped drive the priority, and helped us implement our solution. So as we identified all of these processes, all of these individuals, all of these offices, within those processes comes the systems that house their data. So in those systems, I already went through most of these, but again, you'll notice you have chief procurement officer, they have the contracts. You have the chief security officer, they have the PIV cards, the personnel security, the physical access. You have HR or CHICO office, which has Things like DHS leverages National Finance Center and WebTA for our time and attendance. It has a lot of HR data that we can use to manage access decisions, as well as training funneling through there to be able to support the behave part of CDM for have you taken your cybersecurity awareness training, your privilege training, your system admin training. And finally, the CIO side of the Active Directory accounts. As I mentioned, our Trusted Identity Exchange, it's our attribute exchange service. It's a virtual directory. So what that does is it takes all of this data and it makes it magically look like one view. So when we feed into our governance solution, ALM thinks it has this one magic authoritative source at the department where really that data is scattered across multiple systems. So we're able to build that one comprehensive view, feed our ALM solution, and then now that can start governing our identities and governing our access. So with that, we can do onboarding, as we talked about. We can create your network account. We can do your governance, manage your access. We can do your offboarding and make sure all your access is cut. And what you see on the bottom is, again, like your network accounts. We have some manual emails that we send out, and we have CFO financial applications. Another point there on the financial applications, as we're managing access and governance, so things like the access request process, the certification process, the SOD, we've really been targeting a lot of our financial applications. The reason for that is just like in commercial and industry, where they're heavily regulated, you hear things like SOX, you hear external auditors. Same thing in terms of the government. They have external auditors coming and auditing these applications. They have A123 controls that they need to hit. And a lot of times they have manual processes to achieve these goals. And that's why we're trying to hit the CFO side hard with our governance solution, because a lot of the benefits from requests and certification and separation of duties really come in that CFO swim lane. So I keep mentioning data-driven. I keep mentioning kind of combining these views. So this is a lot of data and a lot of attributes. Don't focus on the line by line here. But the gist of this is if you kind of look at the colors, there's a bunch of different sources on the left-hand side. And they all have a bunch of data, whether, again, it's contract data, organizational structure, who's your supervisor, what organization are you in, what's your email address, what training do you have, all of these in disparate systems. So what we did twofold that was kind of neat and really enabled our governance solution is one, again, as I mentioned, we created that common user view. So consolidating and correlating this information, we're able to paint a picture of who is a user and what are the attributes about them. From a governance solution, this paints you their name, are they an employee or contractor, who's their manager, what organization do they fit in, their email address, and this expands to that entire master user record for things like, are they suitable, like the trust attributes, are they suitable or fit to be on my network, their identity attributes, which we already talked about, the behave attributes about all of the training that they're current on or training that's expiring, and their cred attributes about like their PIV card, their strong credentials, is it active, is their user account control enabled to smart card authentication. So all of those attributes either feed into a common view or subsequent views from there that feed into our governance solution. The other neat thing that we did from our data model perspective is we treated contracts as an entitlement for governance purposes. So why did we do that and what does that mean? Well, when we embarked in this effort, again, offboarding was one of the biggest things that we wanted to solve. One of the biggest challenges that we had was how do you know when someone's left? Right? So from an employee perspective, it's easier. It might not always have been on time, but at least you have things like NFC or your HR system, like you're not going to pay the guy anymore, so you know that you should probably offboard him. But from a contractor perspective, it was really hard because you have contractors that might roll off of a contract. You have contractors that might drop off for like SME support. Maybe they're 5% or 10% on a contract just for reach back, so you can't offboard them. And then you have contractors that kind of roll from contract to contract, task order to task order. You have expiring task orders, so really managing and maintaining all that. So what we did is we modeled in our tie system for ALM those contracts as basically in LDAP talk a group, or in governance talk an entitlement. So the members of that entitlement are the contractors themselves. So as that flows into our governance solution, that enables us to do things like the owner of that entitlement is the core through the data relationships. That core is that contractor's supervisor. So that data model is there. The other things it enables us to do is to have extended attributes on our contracts for the expiration date. So as that expiration date arrives on a contract, we can remove the members of that contract, which basically means offboard them if they don't have any other entitlements, any other contracts. The other thing it does that we've started enabling is a quarterly certification. So as you could certify access to an application or a role or an entitlement, we're also able to certify a contract membership. So what does that mean? Again, you have these circumstances where you don't know if the contractor's left, you don't know if there's SME support, and now you have the core every quarter saying, do a certification for this contract, which means, are these people still on the contract or not? That enables them to remove people they might have missed, and enables us to offboard people that may have been missed. So all about data-driven, leverage the processes, leverage the enterprise data sources that we have to drive policy and drive decisions. So the initial capabilities that we rolled out with this solution really line up with that conceptual model. Again, that onboarding triggered based off of data. So trigger it based off of personnel security and HR data. Trigger it transfers off of HR. Offboarding, as I mentioned, we have multiple triggers. A core can invoke an offboarding. HR can invoke an offboarding. Contracts expiring will invoke offboarding. Revocation of a PIV card, we validate. So if somebody forgets to tell us but they revoke the PIV card, we'll ask the supervisor, did this person leave or not? And inactivity also triggers offboarding. We'll disable your account immediately and then ask, did this person leave or not, so we can fully offboard. We talked about the contract certification as well. This is kind of one of our fallbacks or our safeties in case we miss. At least have constant eyes on who's here and who's not. And obviously auditing and reporting the whole time. So how did we do this? So I started off, I mentioned change management was huge. So a lot of what I've talked about from a governance perspective, when you go past the reporting to actually managing the identities and managing the process, it's a lot of organizational change. It's a lot of new processes. It's a lot of convincing people that this is the right way to do it. So as we did that, we phased our implementation. I mentioned that we had our executive board behind us the whole time. They were briefed on everything that we were doing, and we got their approval before we rolled out. We briefed our integrated project team, the lines of business, on our release schedule, and then we phased it. We did a pilot across 4 offices just to make sure things work well. And obviously, like when you're doing your requirements, when you're doing your development, kind of in your mind, everything's flawless. This thing's going to be the perfect and most beautiful system ever. But until it goes live and until you see it in the wild, there's all these circumstances that you don't think about, all these edge cases and things that pop up. So we did a pilot, right? So we picked 4 offices, did a pilot, got some feedback directly from the people that were using the system, the cores, the supervisors, HR, personnel security, and then we rolled those in as enhancements to our project. So as we rolled those enhancements in and the pilot concluded, then we said, okay, let's do a phased approach. So in our phased approach, we started off with kind of what I call some of our partner offices. So the ones that are giving us the data. So the best way for them to understand the value of the system, since they're sharing our data, is to use the data. So things like procurement, security, HR, we rolled out to them. They're sharing their data with us, and now they're seeing how it actually works in the tool. From there, we picked offices to roll out to. Again, phase by phase, we did this on a monthly fashion. I'll explain what each of these phases included in some of the major activities. But the key message again here is we dissected the environment based on the population within that environment and based on their operational constraints. What do I mean by that? Like you'll kind of notice CIO, I guess I didn't put dates on here, but as we rolled this out, our CIO office has the most contractors. A lot of the contractors are CIO contractors. So we decided, from a schedule perspective, they actually fit nicely into September. Well, that's the end of the fiscal year. There's probably tons of contract turnover. There's lots of stuff happening. Probably not a good idea. So we punted them into the beginning of the next fiscal year, right? So again, based on population and what was going on, same thing with procurement. We got them out of the way early before they hit their busy procurement system, because otherwise their contracting officers would have been, don't talk to me, we're busy, we can't support this, right? So dissect it by population, by complexity, and really what those business offices are doing from their perspective so they can fit in, and it enables the change management, the training, and the adoption. So every time we went through a phase of the rollout, we had a kickoff with the executive leadership for that office. Again, change management, making sure that their leadership's aware. And then from there, it trickled down, identifying the cores, the supervisors, the HR liaisons, and training them. But a lot of it also, one of the things I haven't touched about yet was data cleanup. Again, a lot of these sources I talked about, we're trying to do data-driven, we're trying to model everything off of these authoritative systems. Well, the systems are great for the purpose that they're built for, but as soon as you try to tie together all the data across these systems, there's tons of data quality, tons of cleanup efforts that have to occur. So how do we do that? Again, if we try to do it all at once and say, let's clean up for 15,000 or 300,000 users, it's too much to chew. So we did it with our rollout. So as we rolled out to each of these offices, we said, OK, log into the ALM solution. If you're a core, it gives you this simple ability to go and view your contracts. What contractors, what task orders am I a core for? Then on those task orders, you can view your contractors. And you can say, OK, what contractors are on my task order? If any of those don't line up, if you don't see your task orders, go work with your contracting officer and make sure the procurement system's updated. If you don't see your contractors, go work with personnel security and make sure that they're accounted for on your task order. So as this rollout went out, they logged into ALM. They're able to easily identify and see their data. They're easily able to go and clean up the data. That feeds back to us. And then we go live at the end. And in the middle there is training, obviously. So we train them on how to use the system. So those training options, again, we developed a lot to enable people to use the system. Obviously, when you roll out your training, you might train someone once, but until they're actually using the system, they might forget. So what we did is we built a series of getting started guides. So where do you start? What is ALM? Into quick reference guides, which are really screenshot by screenshot how-tos. We took that and we built comprehensive training courses, recorded videos. So every time we did a rollout, we would do an instructor-led training where we'd coordinate, we'd get in front of them, and we'd actually teach them what the tool's about, what the new processes are and how to use it, and how it fits into their world. But we also left behind PDFs, screenshots, videos that they can reference. So next time that quarterly certification comes out, yeah, I told you about it back in September, but it's kicking off now. You have a quick reference guide to go to and see those screenshots and how to use it. So again, goes back to change management. So some of the key messages, data-driven, change management, data cleanup, governance, and really executive stakeholder buy-in. So with that, like as we continue to mature and we continue to expand, we kind of break it out into a few swim lanes of activities that we're engaged in right now to continue to expand. Our onboarding and offboarding, it's continuing to roll out. Now we are adding some enhancements to this as we learn more throughout the rollout. We continue to try to improve. But we are also, from a comms and outreach perspective, we're rolling out to the rest of our headquarters component, and we're offering it as an enterprise service. When I mentioned the CDM kind of architecture model that we put together, I mentioned some of the components have their own solutions. That's where we give them data to be successful. Some of the components have chosen to leverage our enterprise solution. And in that sense, we roll out to them as well, and it becomes the same exact process. For example, we're rolling out to FEMA right now. We expose their contractors, their contracts to them. They're able to clean up their data just like we did at headquarters. We roll out to them just like we did to headquarters. So that's the onboarding, offboarding swim lane. The other thing we're doing is we're automating some of our interfaces to both our authoritative sources and our downstream systems. We take a very iterative approach to this. So when we started off, we did some manual emails, ServiceNow tickets. And now we're taking those and automating Active Directory, which we're done. Automating our personnel security and activation, our PIV cards. Integrating with applications, so those financial applications I mentioned. And then trying to tackle privilege access management, which we're starting now to embark on this. It's a big goal of the CDM program. So we're trying to partner with CDM and really mature and tackle our privilege management across the department. This is just an example. As I mentioned, we're very iterative. We're very agile in our development. So for even just like the Active Directory portion, how we do this is we tackle it in little bite-sized chunks. And we say, OK, let's disable users and push that to production. Let's create users and push that to production. Tackle inactivity, push that to production. Groups, editing users, et cetera. So we take each of those initiatives, take it into bite-sized chunks, create the epics and stories, and deploy in an iterative fashion. The other thing that we've done with our governance solution is we've turned that into a set of baseline implementation requirements. What I mean by that, again, is at the department, we have the enterprise service, which is access lifecycle management. Several components are implementing their own solution. So to make sure that we're all compliant and to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction, we've taken our lessons learned, whether it's through our implementation, through things like NIST, through our DHS's security policy, all of these in the FICAM, and put all of those into a set of baseline requirements, really tackling the lifecycle management, the governance, and auditing, reporting. And now we're starting to pass that to components to say, if you're implementing, make sure you're hitting these requirements. We'll assess based on these requirements, including our own enterprise solution, and make sure that we're all marching to the same path. And finally, I'll kind of leave you with what another area that we're focusing on next, besides the things I mentioned, are really cloud and our privileged user management. So we're really starting to move into a distributed environment or a multi-cloud environment. We have infrastructure as a service in Azure and AWS. We're moving to software as a service applications. We still have our on-premise data centers at the bottom. And we're trying to govern all of this with our ALM solution and trying to manage the privileged users, which are now everywhere, whether they're in Azure AD or AWS Identity Access Management, on-prem on a Linux box or an Active Directory or a router or a firewall, or whether the user's in a SaaS application that's outside of our control. We're starting to try to tackle that from creating the accounts, assigning the resources. How do you manage that? So this is another one of our big focuses, again, partnering with the CDM program. So that's all I have. I have a few minutes left for questions, if anybody has any questions. Sir?
So no question, CDM works. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. And you talked about the requirements for going in. Does an agency have to change a business process to fall into the model?
At times,
and
yeah.
Where I'm really going is that there's a lot of agencies that don't keep track very well of contractors and contracts, and then it makes it even more complicated because I might be the core, you may be the contractor, but Ross is really taking care of you, and I'm just somebody on a piece of paper or I'm just a figure. So trying to realign, who's taking care of what. That's what I mean by the business process and your requirements.
So absolutely. I mentioned earlier business process change is one of the hardest parts of this whole thing, and that's where kind of both the working group and the executive group come in to kind of really vet, socialize, get buy-in, and adopt. So absolutely, change management and business process is huge. In terms of the core relationship, we do get that a lot, and especially with our data center contracts, they're huge, right? So there's technical solutions around that about who reviews it and who governs it, but ultimately, what we found out working with our security office and our procurement office is the core is responsible. It's on your core designation letters, it's on your core training, and as a core, you are responsible for who's on your contract. Now we have built, again, technical solutions for a contractor PM, for example, to support the core and inform the core and help the core. The core has the ability to delegate to people to help them as well, but ultimately the buck stops with the core. And one of the things that we're trying to enforce in the department is put those practices in place, and it's not acceptable to say, I don't know. You have to know, because that's your responsibility as the core. There is, but that's, again, with the process changes, right? It's adoption. Sir?
I think you have done a great job. I'll have to give you a credit for that. How many people have actually moved, and how many contracts you are handling during this trying to call?
So, like, how many people are using the system? So right now, our headquarters component is about 12 to 15,000. I'll probably say we're about like 50, 60% done with it. Like our entirety of our management directorate is using this system. We're rolling out to the rest of the headquarters. So you see DHS is like 22 operating components. Many of those fit into headquarters. Like you hear like our Office of Legislative Affairs, privacy, policy. So we're tackling those smaller components little by little. So about like 60%, and by February or March, we anticipate hitting that 12, 15,000. We're about to roll out to FEMA. They don't go live for their first phase until January, so that will increase our user count. I don't have a number of contracts, to be honest with you, but
this is great. But did you build the AD from the scratch, or you took a standard AD that you had?
AD already existed. So Active Directory existed, and there's a, excuse me?
Because we are having a lot of trouble cleaning up the AD.
Cleaning up in what perspective? Like which users are there? Yeah, so basically what happens is as you take an identity model, you have your identities and you correlate your Active Directory accounts to them. Where they match up to an identity, I have a personal security record for this guy, that becomes a lot easier because your cores and your HR and stuff start managing those and they can offboard them. Where they don't match up is the bigger problem, and those are orphan accounts. And what we've done with that, and that is a pain point for ours, but we build reports of orphan accounts and we distribute them across the organization, because the easier approach is just cut them all off. But that's going to cause business disruption, right? So what we do is we identify what organization they're on from their AD attributes. We send it to the leadership there and say either create a personal security record for this guy because it's missing for whatever reason, or let us know to disable the account. So that is a challenge, and we're still trying to address it.
Question for you. Does this assume you have a unified or a controlled AD environment, because in a lot of organizations, everybody else, there's a lot of kingdoms and their own ADs and all other stuff. How do you fix that, or how do you approach that, or how did you approach it if you have different ADs that may have different attributes, different schemas and stuff like that to create this ALM situation?
Sure. So where we started wasn't AD, it was the authoritative sources. So we said, how do we build an identity? Because to us, Active Directory is just an account. No different than your application account, no different than some other directory. So it was like, let's take a look at personnel security, HR, all those, PIV cards. That's your identity. So from there, I manage Active Directory as just another application. And since we're rolled out to headquarters, we focused on our Active Directory domain. So as we roll out, then that becomes a question of each different, so because we also have the same problem. We have every component has their own AD for us, some components have multiple. So then it becomes a question of, do you want our enterprise system to manage your AD? In which case, it becomes another application. We integrate with it, we identify the schema, we identify the business logic, we take it on as an application onboarding project. And if not, again, if the component has their own solution, that's where we say, okay, our tie system has the data you want, that will feed your governance solution to manage your AD, and then you'll report back to our enterprise ALM solution for our master user record. So we just basically treat AD as just yet another application that we manage. I think we're over in time. Are we okay? Cut it off? All right. Well, thank you guys very much for having me here today. Appreciate it. Thank you.